Welcome to First Strike here on VSiN. I'm your host, Dave Ross, here from Circus Sportsbook in fabulous Las Vegas, Nevada. For the next hour, going to break down a very intriguing big boy matchup we have on Saturday. Curtis Blaydes against Sergei Pavlovich. So we'll talk about all those changing numbers with Nick Kalikas, Lou Finocchiaro, Jordan Sherwood, and Dan Vreeland. I did want to recap very quickly what we saw last weekend with the, I don't want to say the return of Max Holloway because he's never gone anywhere, but Max Holloway back. Another impressive performance against Arnold Allen. He gets the decision victory in 5, unanimous decision there. I don't think there was any issue there in the scoring on this time around. Edson Barbosa didn't leave it up to the judges with a great dynamic stoppage of Billy Q in round number 1. And then you saw Ian Cutelaba against Tanner Boser there. Pedro Munoz, maybe a bit of a stunner there because Chris Gutierrez was over a $2 betting favorite in that fight. And then you saw Rafa Garcia, easy decision victory over Clay Guida. So very interesting fight night that we saw on Saturday night. But without further ado, as we turn the page, and the UFC does a great job of doing just that, looking ahead, not necessarily behind, we're bringing the guy that sets those numbers here in combat sports right behind me that you see at Circus Sportsbook. He is the one and only Nick Kalikas. Nick, always great to catch up with you here. Before we get to this card here, what did you make of Max and the number? Because we saw it fluctuate a little bit as the week went on when you have such a popular fighter in Max Holloway. Is the general public becoming a sharper MMA bettor?
I think gradually they are, for sure. The more it's kind of thrown in front of your face, the more you watch, the sharper you're going to get naturally. So I do think there's some of that going on. It was great to see Holloway perform at a high level. Arnold Allen is not an easy out.
No.
That was a very competitive fight, but he did exactly what he had to do. So a lot of people think he looked like he's kind of on the decline despite getting the win. I think you got to give him credit for that W, to be honest with you. And he's got enough left in the tank to obviously clean out the rest of the featherweight division. Unfortunately, Volkanovski and him might end up clashing again one day. How crazy is that? I mean, but that's just the way it is right now. But good to see him back at his peak.
Yeah, and we saw Volkanovski, hey, stop wiping out the guys that I'm supposed to be beating here to be the kingpin at 145. So maybe we'll get one more shot with Max and Volkanovski down the road. Obviously, Nick, when you look at a fight like this coming up, and this feels like a smaller card, if you will, but certainly Sergei Pavlovich is a guy that feels like he's a fast tracker right now in the heavyweight division. And a guy like Curtis Blaydes, who has been one of those guys so close, hasn't been able to quite get to the top of the spear here in the heavyweight division. He is a 170 favorite right now. We're seeing at DraftKings. Pavlovich right now, the comeback at 145 plus $1.45. What did you open this number at here at Circa? And have you seen any distinct changes here before we get to fight night here on Saturday?
We not too crazy yet, but I did open it at minus 160 for Blaydes. A little bit shorter than the overall market. It was like minus 170-ish, and now it is at minus 170. So it caught up to the market. We did get some sharp action both ways here, but originally it was on the Blade side. Now we're getting some Pavlovich action back from sharps as well. So this is going to be one of those fights where we have a lot of split opinions, a lot of two-way sharp action is going to come in. And I think it's going to kind of hover around where it is right now. I don't think it's going to fly over 200 or drop closer to a pick. I think it's going to still hover around that range right now.
And Nick, these are two of the bigger guys in the division now, both right around, 265 for Blaydes, about 257, close to 260 for Sergei. When you look at the total, and again, in a main event, you're going to have the prospects of going 5. The marketplace is saying it's not going to go 5, right? Because you're looking at this now. Very rarely do you see a total at, say, a round and a half that you can get plus money, plus $1.45. If you think these big boys can get you 7.5 plus minutes, what have you seen there? And I guess you could go, if you like the Blade side, maybe you lean towards the over. And if you like the Pavlovich side, maybe you think he gets Curtis out of there in relative quick time.
There's going to be nothing but steam on that under, I think, the entire way. Now, of course, there's going to be some sharp action probably coming back in at some point on the over, because the overs tend to be the sharper sides in most cases. But in this spot here, man, it's very difficult because the conflicting styles that you have, these guys are both finishers. Blaydes, of course, known as the wrestler. He's going to look for those takedowns. But once he gets you to the ground, he has some nasty ground and pound, and he has the ability to finish the fight there. And that on the other side of it, Pavlovich is one of the most dynamic and explosive strikers on the feet, and we've seen Blaydes get clipped and put out. So if anybody can knock a guy like Curtis Blaydes out once again, it's a guy like Pavlovich. So I think they kind of conflict, and they're kryptonite to each other, if that makes sense. That's why you're seeing the total get steamed on the under. I don't think this is going to go 7.5 minutes, to be honest with you, because I just don't think if Pavlovich gets on his back, he's going to get finished before it gets to round 3 or before it gets over that 1.5 mark, I should say, into round 2 or whatnot. And then I think the other way around, if Blaydes isn't able to get the takedown, he's going to get sparked right before he gets there. So it's going to end early. I do think it probably ends under 7.5 minutes. And the steam is kind of indicating that as well. And I think it's probably right.
Nick, what's fascinating about that, too, because sometimes you want to look, as we mentioned, maybe correlated plays to see if you can extract more value out of it. But really, in the Pavlovich side, if you think that the method of victory is going to be KO, TKO, DQ, it's not that much north of what he already is as a betting dog in its entirety, right? Plus $1.45, plus $1.75 here for the KO, TKO, or DQ prop. The problem with Blaydes, if you don't want to lay the $1.70 here, is how does he get that manner of victory? Because, again, you mentioned he can do vicious ground and pound if he gets down to the mat. That's about minus $1.10 we're seeing here. But maybe he does as a wrestler. Does he look to maybe if you give him your back and your neck's exposed, sub is 9-1, and you see by finish just in any manner of victory, minus $1.35. Is there other ways that you think that people might try to manipulate this market instead of just playing the side or total?
I mean, the props definitely, like, if you're going to bet Pavlovich, he's going to win this fight by knockout. He's not going to win it by sub. He's not going to win it by decision. He's going to win it by knockout. So if you're going to bet Pavlovich, that's probably the way to look. Now, of course, the limits are not going to be as high, so you're not going to be able to get down a ton of cash on the props, but you're still going to get maybe extract a little bit more value that way. And the same thing for Blaydes. Now, you did hit the nail on the head there. Blaydes might have a couple more options because if he does get to the ground, he's not known for his submissions, but at the same time, we could see a sub and club sort of thing. I wouldn't be shocked if that happens eventually with Blaydes as well. So I do think that you can look for the finish prop on the Blaydes side, or you can look for the knockout specific prop on the Pavlovich side. That's the way to go for this fight.
Yeah, absolutely. And in my Chicago days with Curtis, used to talk to Curtis a lot. And back then, he didn't really care about being the flashy fighter. He just wanted to get the W. That means wrestling, right? Now you get a little bit longer in the tooth. I wonder if you're willing to let yourself in your hands go there, which could put you in danger against Pavlovich there. But again, very interesting to look at those props and maybe manipulating the market that way. When you look at the co-main here, Brad Tavares, we got veterans here against Bruno Silva. And right now, Tavares is a small betting favorite here, about minus $1.60, minus $1.65. Has this number changed since you opened it here at Circa?
The opener at Circa was actually Tavares minus 155, comeback plus 35. And right now, again, another spot where we're seeing we did get bet up on Tavares with a sharp group came in and hit us on the Tavares side, but now we're starting to see some buyback on the Silva side as well. So another spot where we're going to see some two-way action, and the line kind of bounced up and bounced back down a little bit too. This is a tough one, man. Of course, I think Tavares has been underrated throughout his whole career. He's such a tough out. He's got outstanding takedown defense, very solid striking, that savvy vet experience across the board, everything you got to love about him, but he's been around for a long time. He's getting a little bit older. And Bruno Silva, I think he's never fought better. I mean, he's faced some stiff competition. He continues to improve despite having, some setbacks along the way. So this is definitely an interesting fight because if we see the decline being real with Tavares, Silva could definitely win this fight. But if we see a classic performance from Tavares, I think he does come away with a win here. So this is probably appropriately set, and we're going to continue to see two-way action on this fight.
And on the total as well, again, 3-round fight here, potentially here. The over 2.5 rounds right now, minus $1.05, so pretty evenly priced here for that 2.5. I'm sure some people might look, if they want to play the over, Nick, maybe you advise there, well, just play the fight to go the distance, and you might not even have to pick a winner if you really think it's going to hit the cards here with all three, correct?
Yeah, I mean, I could see that happening for sure. I mean, I question Tavares at times with his durability, but at the same time, I mean, he's just such a warrior. He's not easy to get out of there as well. And then Silva's proven to be a tough out too, like meaning he's not going to quit on you. So I do think, if anything, you might want to slightly lean towards the over, especially if you're getting plus money. Mm-hmm. But another not easy spot because, like, again, these guys are getting up there in age a little bit, so we could just see that decline spot hit overnight, so to speak, and then maybe Tavares just gets put out early. So that's I think the thing you got to be concerned about the most. But if you're going to chase anything, it's probably the plus money in the over.
Nick Kalikas does a great job. You can follow him as I do on Twitter at Fight Odds. Nick, we talked about this throughout the beginning of our show here on First Strike on VSiN, that there's always a premium. There's a tax put in for popular fighters, right? That's just the way the public wants to bet them. Does Bobby Green qualify now as one of those guys that it's taxed into the market a little bit? Because we know how much the fan base has an affinity for Bobby. Minus 250 against Jared Flash Gordon.
Yeah, I mean, there is definitely some of that because he's a popular fighter, but he's a good fighter. That's the thing. I mean, it's justified in most cases with a guy like Bobby Green, and then Jared Gordon coming off that win. I mean, coming off that loss, that should have been a win over Paddy Pimblett. That brought his stock way up too. So I think both these guys are actually trending in a very good direction according to the public eye because, I mean, they're both in the spotlight. They're both getting respect. we're seeing a little bit more money come in on Jared Gordon. There's some sharp action coming in his way. I don't necessarily agree with that. I know Gordon's a tough out. I just think stylistically this is going to be a tough fight because I do think Bobby Green can kind of outpoint him along the way. I think he is the better striker here, but Bobby Green's also going to be getting hit by some bombs from Gordon's side. I think the takedown defense here should neutralize each other out a little bit too. So this is probably going to be a striking affair. We probably do see Gordon try to clinch up against the cage and kind of slow this fight down, make it a grinding, grueling type of fight. But this is another spot where it's going to be competitive, but I do think Bobby Green wins. Now, of course, according to the price, it's not easy to lay minus 250. So I'm not surprised by the action coming in on the under, especially, like I said, based on that performance. There's a lot of recency bias that gets kind of mixed into these numbers from time to time. And we're seeing that a little bit with the Gordon side. Like people are going to come in and bet it automatically. They're, hey, this guy beat Paddy Pimblett. He's a solid fighter, which he is a solid fighter. But again, styles make fights. I think this is going to be a difficult fight that Gordon can hang, but I don't think he's going to get it done.
Yeah, and you mentioned it there, Nick. You think that maybe the takedown defense stalls it out, so it should be a fight on the hands. Over 2.5 rounds right now, heavily juiced, minus 275. Thinking this one goes the cards, you don't get much of a discount, minus 250 without picking a winner. So we're expecting that one potentially to hit the cards. Nick, always a pleasure, my friend, to catch up with you. Check him out on Twitter. Great work at ESPN as well, live on the line. So, Nick, we really appreciate you as always, my friend.
Thank you, sir. Have a great weekend and enjoy the fights.
Absolutely. When we come back, and go to Arizona to catch up with Lou Finocchiaro next here on First Strike. DraftKings Sportsbook is giving you plenty of ways to bet the UFC. Just download the DraftKings Sportsbook app. You're going to be able to bet on more than just the main event. DraftKings has great odds on fight lines, total rounds, and futures for all MMA events. Eligibility restrictions to apply. See DraftKings.com/sportsbook for the full terms and conditions. Back here in Las Vegas, Dave Ross here at Circus Sportsbook. What a pleasure each and every week to go to Gamblu out there in the great state of Arizona. Lou Finocchiaro, and again, does a great job with his podcast. We can talk about that as well. Lou, I know you've been on fire giving out some picks on the pod. Tell the people how they access it and what they get when they tune in each and every Friday.
Well, first of all, Dave, thanks for having me on. This is a highlight each week. The Bout Business podcast is dropped on Friday after the weigh-ins, and it's simply a final synopsis of my final 4 or 5 releases for that week's fight card. It's available noon Fridays wherever you get your podcasts, and thank you for letting me mention that.
Always. And when you get to the heavyweights, I guess you don't have to worry about the scales as much in the handicap when you have a Sergei Pavlovich and certainly Curtis Blaydes. Curtis, the heavy end of the scale there, about 265. Do you glean anything into that? Because I know, obviously, we make a lot of differences in the lighter weight classes and maybe these tough weight cuts. But for the heavyweights, does that factor in at all?
That's a great question, Dave, and I'll tell you that it would if I see a heavyweight make drastic fluctuations in weight between the last fight and this one. If a guy weighed 242, now he comes in at 252, I got questions with that, or if it's reversed. In this case, I don't expect anything funny as far as the weigh-ins. Blaydes will be 264 or whatever, maybe Pavlovich 55 or higher, and really, I think the dynamics of this fight take place other than on the scale.
Yeah, no question. Pavlovich does have that 4-inch reach advantage, and plus 145 right now, DraftKings as the dog. We know that Curtis, if there's a kryptonite for somebody that might be one of the best wrestlers in the heavyweight division, it's maybe the chin. I mean, look, Derek Lewis knocks a lot of guys out. He easily won that first round against Derek back in the day, and then he gets stopped in the second. Is there a danger for Curtis to eschew the wrestling and stand toe-to-toe with a guy like Pavlovich, who feels like he's really on the comeuppance here in the heavyweight division?
In my opinion, that's Curtis not using IQ, and I give him credit for decent IQ. That's him not using IQ and going to fight the other man's fight. The young man Pavlovich is 14 of 16 wins his first round, and all his UFC fights first round finish. The total in this fight 1.5. Really indicative to me of some Pavlovich correlation. Now, that said, as I handicap this fight from the Blaydes point of view, I'm telling him, let's get to round 2. So hug him, maul him, stay away from him, run from him, do anything you got to do to get this into round 2. Because at that point in time, what we do know is Blaydes can wrestle. He's got great cardio. He can go all day, and he has to keep from getting touched against a power guy like Pavlovich. And we don't know what Pavlovich brings into round 2 or beyond. I'm certain that the Blaydes camp wants to take this thing into 2 or beyond, and Pavlovich doesn't want to see that, in my opinion.
Oh, I think that's exactly the correlated play there, Lou. That's exactly the way I see it, too. That if you like the Curtis side, and he's minus $1.70 favorite here, that it could be a correlated play to the over, plus $1.45 right now, because unless he absolutely gets down there and Pavlovich has nothing off his back, if Curtis can get that takedown, then maybe to your point, Lou, he just gets into the gas tank, right? That he looks to get in the gas tank of the younger Pavlovich, who's been steamrolling guys in the first round. And then if that over comes into play, maybe even the live number, you've got to really like Blaydes' chances if he can extend this into a second round and beyond. Is that the way you're looking at it from the favorite side?
Exactly. I think that if Blaydes can get this into round 2, then the fight becomes more his style, and the questions all lie with Pavlovich. And then we get to see what kind of cardio he has, what kind of chin he has. Can he get up off his back? You do not want Blaydes to take you down and get on top. And I don't care who you are. Now, that said, the concern for Blaydes has to be speed, power, explosion. This kid's a monster, and I think he's for real. And if Ngannou and Derek Lewis were able to touch Blaydes, I look at Pavlovich as faster, more explosive than those two, surely faster. And so there's risk there for Blaydes as well.
Lou, I love it each and every week when our experts come on here, First Strike. You give us some fights that you certainly like here on a Tuesday. The very first fight on the card you've got listed here that's caught your attention here. Tell me a little bit about Brady Highstand against Batgarel Dana. Right now, Dana about minus $1.40, Highstand plus $1.20. So don't blink, don't sleep in the prelims, because Lou likes something right out of the gate in this fight.
Well, usually I'm very conservative early, but this one caught my eye. Hestad, if I'm pronouncing it correctly, he's got a little size, but he's very young. He's coming in relatively green, and this is an experience and who he's been in the cage with for Mr. Batcherel. I don't know if it's Dana Batcherel or Batcherel Dana. Whatever it is, he opened 175. Now he's down to minus 130. This is a watch and monitor. We're going to keep our finger on the pulse of this one and see how low it will go before we jump. But I do like Batgerel Dana here. If please excuse the mispronunciation.
Yeah. And again, down to $1.40, so that price tag has come down, maybe making it a little bit more affordable if you want to go on the Dana side here. Let's get to another fight that I know has piqued your interest. Very interesting matchup here with Norman Dumont against Carol Rosa. And right now, Rosa minus $1.05, Dumont minus $1.15. So, Lou, very evenly priced here in the marketplace. What do you make of this matchup?
Well, I make it that I'm pretty tardy because Dumont opens this fight as a plus 190 underdog, and she's been completely gassed all the way to a pick position, and I see why. It's because Carol Rosa is a 135er moving up to 45, and Dumont, since she moved to 145, is 3-1, takes to the division well. She's the natural 145-pound athlete. I like her a lot in this spot. Am I too late? Maybe. But to grab her now is probably more advantageous than waiting till Friday. Any higher on Dumont, I would pass, but close to pick, I think it's still a go.
All right, so right now, minus $1.15. Don't let that number get away, as Lou is telling us here on First Strike. The biggest favorite on the board is Montel Jackson. He's a $6 betting favorite against Ronnie Yaya. Yaya can be kind of a wild man in there in a potential 3-round matchup. Is there any chance of backing the biggest dog here, plus 450 on the card on Saturday?
There is. Montel Jackson comes, if he came with no wrestling, I'd really be doing jumping jacks over Ronnie Yaya. But he comes with some good takedown ability and some good wrestling chops. And so for that reason, I think you have to be guarded. That said, this number's out of line. I don't
Mm-hmm.
think Montel Jackson should be that high over anyone in the division. If I were to try something with Ronnie Yaya, I would try it via sub. That's how he gets all his victories. And so Yaya by sub, those prices I don't think are available just yet. But that'd be a juicy way to enhance a big underdog.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. It feels like it's a little bit overpriced there for Montel Jackson here at $6. Muhammad Usman is back in this card, and Junior Tafa right now. Usman minus $1.05 against Tafa, 115. Of course, Muhammad and Kamaru Usman. This is the bigger version of the Usman guys in the octagon. What do you make of him? He still looks raw out there, kind of wings his shots a little bit in the heavyweight division, but he clearly has some power as we've seen on display recently.
Big power, big, huge guy, slow as evolution, though, really. And his last fight, the fight that I saw him in was against the young athlete Pagua, who ended up fighting at light heavyweight his next fight. He was totally undersized, and he knocked him out. But Pagua was moving well and having his way with him. I think this is a good fight for Tafa. I like the Tafa side here. Usman's going to have to show me that he is something that deserves an athlete that deserves to be in the UFC, and not just shirt tailing the name off the brother. We've seen some brothers, Figueiredo and others, that don't quite stack up to the legit brother. And I'm almost wondering if this could be the case.
Very quickly, just about a minute ago, Jared Gordon didn't beat Paddy Pimblett, but it feels like we all thought he won that fight. Now he's a big dog against Bobby Green. Do you think Bobby should be a 250 betting favorite?
Yes, I think probably so. What Bobby did against Drew Dober in defeat last out was very, very impressive. I looked for him to bounce after that loss. He had Dober weak knee willied on a couple of different occasions. So he's got that power. He's going to be the faster, quicker, more precise striking athlete. And he's got good, solid takedown defense. Great experience, been in with a lot of talent, higher ranked than Paddy Pimblett. So I think it's a legitimate favorite position.
There he is, everybody. Lou Finocchiaro. Check out the Bout Business podcast on Friday. Lou, you do a great job. We appreciate you each and every Tuesday here on First Strike. When we come back, going to Chicago, Jordan Sherwood's up on the docket next here on First Strike. There certainly is a lot to bet on in the next 30 days. For a limited time, you can subscribe to VSiN for just $9.99. That gets you insight into daily MLB best bets, NBA, NHL playoffs, the Kentucky Derby, and the upcoming NFL Draft. Only VSiN Pro subscribers get access to a daily recap of the top plays made by VSiN show hosts and guests. Tools like our betting splits let you see where the money and bets are moving for every single game. Also, a top VSiN experts leaderboard to view betting records, profit, ROI, see which VSiN experts have the current hot hand. So sign up for just $9.99 at VSiN.com/subscribe. My next guest always has the hot hand in a cold, cold city of Chicago. He is Jordan Sherwood. You can follow Jordan as I do at Wood on ESPN 1000. He is also helping out the guys over at Fat Jack Sports, host of the Unnamed MMA Pod. He's doing a lot of things there in Chicago. Is it wintertime already in Chicago, or are you guys gearing up for your 2 weeks of summer?
We had 80 on Saturday, and then the next day it was 30, and then snowed on Monday. Like I don't understand what's happening right now. It's 60. It's decent. I think golf weather is not upon us for sure. But then you have to worry about the occasional frost delay that exists here in Chicago.
My 8 years in Chicago, Jordan, I always enjoyed those 2 weeks of golf season. They were fantastic each and every summer. Let's get to this fight card this weekend. And again, you got a Chicago guy on this card in the main event. You know him well, Curtis Blaydes. So Curtis coming in as a solid favorite here, minus $1.70 against Sergei Pavlovich. You know this very well. We know what Curtis Blaydes wants to do. That's wrestle, right? Again, in my conversations with Curtis through the years, he hasn't always cared about, looking the prettiest out there. He doesn't mind making it a grind. Is that the only way you see him beating Pavlovich if he is to get his arm raised in victory?
Yeah, but I worry about that being the game plan. First and foremost, I really wish we saw the end result of his fight with Tom Aspinall. We were
Right.
all ruined with a great headlining fight. He wins a fight 15 seconds into it, injury, torn ACL for Tom Aspinall, because it would have been very interesting to see how he would have done against a younger, athletic, powerful striker that's got a good, Brazilian jiu-jitsu game. Pavlovich, also it kind of falls into that category, not in the Brazilian jiu-jitsu standpoint, but a wrestling standpoint. He just hasn't shown it yet. I mean, this is a guy that was a combat sambo, perfectionist before he got into mixed martial arts and he started knocking people out. And I think you have to dismiss his UFC debut. I mean, throwing in there against the Wolves against Alistair Overeem, that's no easy task. And I think that the big bright lights got to him. But what has he done since then? He's knocked out Derek Lewis. He knocked out Pai Tuivasa, both in under a round, and looked impressive in doing so. So I'm very curious to see what Curtis Blaydes is going to do. Is he going to try any stand up, which obviously I think would be a recipe for disaster, or is he going to wrestle, which we haven't seen Pavlovich have to force to do it, but he's got it in his back pocket. So I think you're seeing where I'm headed. I think there's value early on in the week with Pavlovich just because maybe he's not known from a name standpoint, but he's been in there with some of the top heavyweights we currently have in the UFC. And it's taken him around to dust them both off.
Yeah, I'm fascinated too by the total because we talk about correlated plays a lot, right? So because Pavlovich has been getting guys out of there early, right, in those first rounds, really not getting into the cardio at all. We know that Curtis does have that wrestling background and that cardio. So I think in a perfect world, he'd like to extend this. But right now, you can get good money for a 5-round potential main event here at over a round and a half at plus $1.50s we're seeing out there, plus $1.45s. So is that the only way that Curtis wins is by extending instead of making this a quick night? And if Pavlovich, if we don't know about the cardio, does that worry you? And maybe you hop in live if this fight all of a sudden goes deep into a second round?
Yeah, I think that's the direction. If you want to look at the total, you definitely look, I believe, at the over, understanding that Curtis Blaydes' method and way to victory is a grind, is getting the takedowns and either getting a late finish or something into those championship rounds. So I would agree with value there. But however, if you're on the Pavlovich side, yeah, you question the cardio because you just haven't seen it. You don't know it. Is he going to be able to handle not only a 5-round fight, but a 5-round fight against Curtis Blaydes?
Right.
So I think right now, as it stands on Tuesday, I've seen Curtis Blaydes get knocked out. I've seen him run into that uppercut of Derek Lewis. I've seen him obviously get stopped by Francis Ngannou. And I just worry that he's going in there against a guy that's going to be maybe fighting for the championship at some point very soon. So that's why I like right now Pavlovich plus money, but I certainly agree with the over at 1.5 as a safer play to kind of hedge your bet, if you will.
Yeah, no question about it. I mean, if Curtis is going to be Curtis, he's going to be shooting right from the onset in that very first round to try to stall out Pavlovich. He does not want to stand and give that strikeout artist there, a KO artist, any space to move. So that should be the game plan for Curtis going forward. I want to get into some other fights that you have already documented here on a Tuesday that you like. Karine Silva against Priscilla Cachoeira. Cachoeira right now about plus $1.60. Silva, I'm seeing here about minus $1.40. What's your lean here in this bout?
No, that's thanks to Britain. I should have clarified on the Silva because it was Bruno Silva that I texted him. But nonetheless, obviously with Cachoeira, she's impressive. Obviously been in the UFC for quite some time. Struggles when fights get to the ground. We saw that against Jillian Robertson, the submission rear naked choke loss that she had a couple of fights back. But look, the last time out, she looked awesome against the queen of violence,
yes,
Ariane Lipski. So I think momentum is certainly on her favor. The Silva, there's not much known about her, obviously, with her, short mixed martial arts UFC tenure. So I like Cachoeira in that fight just based on the resume and how great she looked the last time out in her bantamweight debut. But then again, that's another fight that you're going to have to wait and see. What does she look like at the scale? That's why we talked to you about Tuesdays. And I'm like our buddy Lou. I wait till Friday to make those official releases because you cannot have the confidence that someone's going to be able to win that first fight and win it against the scale.
Well, let's get to the, since you like Cachoeira against that Silva, let's get to the Silva that you do like here, and that is Bruno Silva in the co-main event against Brad Tavares. Tavares, obviously a very popular fighter. Both these guys been around the block here in their mid-30s. And Tavares right now is minus $1.75, but you're going to back the dog in this one, and Silva he's been looking pretty darn good in his last couple bouts.
Yeah, I mean, he has. I mean, look, he is, coming off back-to-back losses. I was picking him to beat Alex Pereira. I don't think I definitely didn't know how good Alex Pereira was going to be winning the championship in the way that he did, but I thought we were going to see some wrestling, some takedowns from Silva, which he's got that in his back pocket. He's also got a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt that he rarely uses because he likes to go in there and try and knock people out. Brad Tavares is probably the wrong guy to do that. And thankfully, Brad Tavares isn't fighting. You just mentioned the age of Bruno Silva. He's not fighting like, the next up-and-comer. It was like a 3 or 4 fight run.
Right.
Brad Tavares was taking on Israel Adesanya, Edmund Shabazian, Dricus Duplessis. So, thankfully for him, it's against a veteran. But here's the thing. Tavares, even though he's a tough out, a grinder, a hard guy to finish, I think the combination of Tavares either wanting to stand and trade, which I believe favors Silva, or look to utilize some wrestling. I think Silva's going to be able to rely on what he knows or what he grew up doing with his Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. So, again, I think he's a guy you look at early on in the week at plus money until people start to pick it up a little bit, that this is kind of almost a pick-em fight as I believe it should be handicapped.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, whenever you're fighting Alex Pereira, I kind of throw out those results. We didn't know the monster that Pereira would become. I still can't believe he lost that fight to Israel Adesanya a couple weeks ago. I'm going to move past that. I do want to get to another fight that you like this week, Jordan. That's one of the better nicknames out there in Semi the Jetty. It's right now, you can get Matthew Semelsberger here at minus $1.15 against Jeremiah Wells. Wells is minus $1.05. Why are you backing Semelsberger in this one?
Yeah, well, I think Semelsberger looked fantastic in his last fight against Jake Matthews. I think a lot of people were underestimating him, kind of fading him a little bit because he had a loss against Alex Morano. Jake Matthews was surging, coming off a win. But let's remember too that Jake Matthews did take that fight on short notice. But I think Semi's a tough guy to match up for. He's long, he's athletic, he's got really good leg kicks, a long reach. The thing about it, though, is he's kind of facing a guy that mirrors a similar game plan, a long, athletic welterweight that has knockout power and quite the resume. I mean, look, back-to-back wins or 2 of his last 3 wins, Jeremiah Wells against UFC veterans. Warley Alves asking to fight him on short notice in your UFC debut, knocks him out. Then he knocks out Court McGee. That guy never gets finished,
right.
And he did against Jeremiah Wells. So actually, I think I like Matthew Semelsberger just straight up. I think he's just got a little bit more variety in his game. I think the athleticism, the length might actually cause some issues for Jeremiah Wells. But my real definitive play is these 2 guys, despite being finishers, I think both have, Wells has 9 finishes and 11 wins, both wins and losses, and Semelsberger's like 9 and 14. I like the over in this fight. I think this is going to the judges' scorecards. These guys mirror each other so well. It's going to be a stand-up fight. Who's going to outpoint who? And I think that Semelsberger is going to land more and more volume to get the notch, get the win at that near pick'em value. But the over is certainly what I'm looking at as well.
And right now, 1.5, it is juiced to minus $1.60, but you don't have to pay the full tax of 2.5 rounds. Might be the way to go there, even if you have to lay a little bit more of the juice. I see that Chicago Bears pin. You're getting close to the NFL draft. Very quickly, 15 seconds to go, they traded out of that number 1 spot. Who does Jordan Sherwood want the Bears to draft?
I think they're going to trade it again. Get more picks.
They're on the move
Trade
again.
it again. Get more picks.
Jordan, appreciate you as always, my friend. We'll catch up again next week. Enjoy those fights. Going to go up to Boston next. Catch up with Dan Vreeland right here. First Strike on VSiN. Back here on First Strike, Dave Ross in Las Vegas, going out to Boston, Massachusetts to catch up with our guy, Dan Vreeland. You can follow Dan as I do on Twitter at Gumby Vreeland, writer at Gambling Podcast, Cage Side Press, and host of Top Turtle MMA and SGPN MMA. Dan Vreeland, Oh my goodness, look at that, everybody. America shaved the beard. So I know Mom's going to have some comments on that today, as she likes to watch our guests each and every week. I do want to get to a couple things because our producer, Britton Hess, does a great job. And sometimes he comes in and gives us his expertise as well. And in the break, he just asked a great question. And I'll just repeat Britton's question to you. What's your favorite fight in this card? And what's your favorite fight to bet on this card? They could be one and the same, or they could be two very different things.
So my favorite fight to watch on this card is easily Jeremiah Wells versus Matthew Semelsberger. I think it's so interesting because it's a pair of guys who clearly like have some grappling chops, right? But Matthew Semelsberger has largely just decided to forego those and just throw hands. Because you watch that fight with Jake Matthews, super exciting fight with Jake Matthews. He dropped Jake Matthews a couple of times, which blew me away. And then he did go to the wrestling when he absolutely needed it. Same thing out of Jeremiah Wells. He's a guy out of Renzo Gracie, Philly. Which means he can grapple, he can get down on the mats. But there he is flatlining Court McGee, like a guy who just does not get knocked out in Court McGee. Jeremiah Wells touches his chin once and he's out. I love this fight from a stylistic standpoint. And I think it's going to be super interesting. I lean Jeremiah Wells ever so slightly because I think Matthew Semelsberger just like leaves himself open to be hit too much. And while, maybe Jake Matthews didn't make anything out of that, Jeremiah Wells will. And my favorite fight to bet on this card, I think it has to be Jared Gordon versus Bobby Green because I love the dog spot here in Jared Gordon. I think Jared Gordon is maybe one of the most criminally underrated fighters out there because he's so good on the mat, right? Like, he lost that fight with Paddy Pimblett. Sure, we can use the word loss if you want, but like he basically beat the hell out of Paddy Pimblett on the feet, and when he didn't want to box him anymore, he took him down for good measure. There aren't a lot of people out there saying, let me grapple with Paddy Pimblett because, Paddy, his skills are very clear. He's a much better grappler than he is a striker, even though he is a good striker, but he's a much better grappler than he is a striker. And Jared Gordon is just one of those guys who didn't care. He outstruck him at points. He outgrappled him at points. And Bobby Green has had issues with that before. If you go back to his fight with Thiago Moises took him down a couple of times. And while he's a good grappler, he's not typically all that great of a wrestler. Bobby Green's the type of guy who, when he's getting taken down, jumps guillotines, tries to hit switches, looks for kimuras. All that kind of stuff just leaves you underneath Jared Gordon in a bad spot. So, yeah, I'd like Jared Gordon here to maybe out-wrestle him. And, it's better than $2 is the price right now. Probably not going to get a finish. You want to soup it up a little bit more and get him by decision. I like Jared Gordon by decision here.
And that's what's fascinating. Again, Reed Kuhn doing a great job helping us out with the Uber tail of the tape. It's basically even, right, with the check marks here when you look at that. And so I think what you're getting at, Dan, is this feels like a mispriced fight, right? This fight, yes, can Bobby Green win it? Absolutely. But should he be, a minus 250 favorite? You're looking at, that just feels a little bit too steep right now for Jared Gordon, who can, if Bobby Green's takedown defense is not on point, control you on the mat, but he's gotten a lot better with his hands, as you mentioned. So it is a very intriguing stylistic matchup, and I'm right there with you. I think this fight should be a little bit closer in the pricing, and it's not right now. I wonder if that'll change before we get to Saturday. When you look at the main event, and I am fascinated by this fight, obviously Curtis Blaydes always feels like he's been nipping on the heels of getting a title shot. Sergei Pavlovich now feels like that guy. That if he keeps rocketing up the heavyweight division, it's going to be Pavlovich that could soon be in line for a title shot. Do you look at it like a title eliminator? And do you think Blaydes should be a, $1.70 betting favorite as he is right now?
So first of all, I think one of these two should be fighting for the title instead of Stipe, if we're being completely honest. As much as I love Stipe Miocic, the rematch just doesn't make sense to me. So I'd already put one of them in there. So yes, this should be a title eliminator. And I actually do like Curtis Blaydes at this price. While Pavlovich has clearly gotten the hands and he's really shown he can box, nobody has really tried to wrestle Sergei Pavlovich outside of two people. Shamil Abdurakhimov, who went 0 for 1 in takedown attempts. And really, if you look at that takedown entry he threw a kind of a spammed out overhand right, wound up in on like a body lock, but didn't really work for the legs or anything like that. It was a really half-hearted attempt. And then you look at Alistair Overeem in his debut, who not only took him down, but beat the living hell out of him once he was down. and if you can't get out from underneath Alistair Overeem, I got some bad news when you're about to fight Curtis Blaydes. And same thing with, if Shamil Abdurakhimov is getting in on a body lock and getting inside of your striking range, I really think that Curtis Blaydes is going to have a way easier time, and he is going to get in on the leg. So, yeah, I really like Curtis Blaydes here. Shooting takedowns. I wouldn't be surprised if he finished him with grounded pound because he has gotten way more vicious than that grounded pound as of late, too.
Oh yeah, Alistair Overeem can attest to that. Certainly from Curtis Blaydes. Hey,
Yeah.
you know, when I look at this too at the total, Dan, it is fascinating to me because I think what you just alluded to there with Curtis, once he gets, if he does in fact finish those takedowns, it's not laying on a guy. He is going to go for stuff, right? He's going to look to ground and pound. Don't know if he'll look for a sub necessarily, but right now the over 1.5, you get solid plus money if Curtis gets control, tries to get into the gas tank of Pavlovich. Conversely, though, I guess the danger would be that he could finish him a little bit quick because we haven't seen Pavlovich really go deep into the night in any fight. Is that playable for you at plus $1.45 to get over 7.5 minutes?
I definitely think it is. And for a couple of reasons. Number one, I think if you're on the Curtis Blaydes side, you should be on the over as well. Because Curtis Blaydes, if he's going to win this, I don't think he's going to get him out of there super fast. Like the only person that Curtis Blaydes went in there and got out in, extremely quick fashion was Chris Dawkins. And that was, that was a Curtis Blaydes we had never seen before. He's not going to go in there and do that to Pavlovich. He's not going to go in there and try to do that to Pavlovich. I think the only people who are betting the under here are the people betting Pavlovich too. Which is kind of weird why the odds would be negative 170 on Blaydes and then, juice to the plus or plus money on the over rather. That just seems odd to me. So yeah, I like Blaydes and I like the over here.
I want to talk about another heavyweight bout on here, and people are going to see the last name Usman and go, ooh, do I have to back Muhammad Usman against Junior Tafa here? I get it when you got the correlations with Kamaru, but this is a much different fighter than the guy that fights at 170 versus the guy we're going to see at the heavyweight division. Still feels raw. Maybe gas tank. You got some issues there. What do you make of Muhammad? Because right now it's pretty evenly priced against Tafa.
Yeah, and this is, again, the other Tafa, too, which is a fun mention, right? It's not just the Tafa. We got Junior Tafa. It's not Kamaru Usman. It's Muhammad Usman. The thing is, I do think Muhammad Usman is super green. I think he's got a lot to learn. I think there's times he leaves himself open to shots. But as he showed in that fight with Zach Ponga, he's got incredible power. He's a tough guy. He hits like a truck. And the thing about Junior Tafa and that I've seen so far, in his regional fights, is he fought Nicholas Jurjevic in Brave, I believe it was Brave CF, who he's a 41-year-old dude who's 4-4, which is not the type of guy you want to have a tough fight with. And that guy went in there and took him down like 3 or 4 times. He laid on top of him. He had him almost at a crucifix. Junior Tafa's a guy who's got huge discrepancy between his very solid striking and his very questionable wrestling and takedown defense. I don't know that Muhammad will lean on that. That's my biggest concern with him. But I think if he does just enough, he can really wear on Junior Tafa. And, I think he will keep himself safer against the striking. So, yeah, I actually favor Muhammad Usman in this one. I think he's going to get the job done as long as he mixes it up a bit.
Got a couple minutes to go here with Dan Vreeland. You can follow him on Twitter as I do at Gumby Vreeland. Let's talk about the ladies' fights that we have in this card here. Priscilla Cachoeira right now about plus $1.60 underdog against Karine Silva. Is this a live dog scenario in your eyes here?
I think it is. And I like Karine Silva. I love her submission skills. That Doris choke finish she had in her last fight. Super, super sharp. But the problem is she just doesn't really have good sense of range. If you watch most of her fights, she's throwing leg kicks from way too far away. She's pumping out that jab, but kind of isn't even close to landing that jab. And she's fighting against somebody who has got very heavy hands in Priscilla Cachoeira. She's been putting people away, including Ariane Lipsky in her last fight, just a minute in. And Karine Silva also doesn't really have the takedowns. If you watched her fight on the Contender Series, she fought Queen Ween Liu, and she just didn't get anywhere close to taking her down. Now, Liu is a little bit tougher in the wrestling department than Priscilla Cachoeira, but I think Cachoeira just has a better sense of distance and a lot heavier hands here. So, yeah, I like Cachoeira as a dog here.
30 seconds to go. We got Norma Dumont right now is minus $1.15 favorite here against Carol Rosa. Rosa right now minus $1.05. Any lean in a very evenly priced fight?
Yeah, that one's a tough one for me. I am leaning ever so slightly to Carol Rosa. I think she just wrestles better, and I think that's ultimately what's probably going to come down in the judges' scorecards. Rosa kind of disappointed me a little bit in the Lena Landsberg fight, and before I was all in on her as a potential challenger here, but I still think she handles it. Dumont gave up a bunch of takedowns to Macy Chiasson, so she'll give some up here.
Dan, great stuff as always, my friend. Always appreciate the time. Want to thank Dan Vreeland for joining the program. Jordan Sherwood, Lou Finocchiaro, and of course, Nick Kalikas as well. Enjoy the fights, everybody. We'll see you next week right here. First Strike on VSiN, the Sports Betting Network.